Good afternoon, everybody. It is 1 o'clock in the afternoon Central Standard Time on this beautiful sunny Friday, the 24th of August. This is the last second to last trading day of August. And yeah, it should be a pretty interesting last week of August as we start moving. Yesterday, we talked about the evidence of a crypto market bottom and looking at the conditions that are met for finding the bottom of a market before there's another expansion phase. And one of the things that we talked about was basing price structure and then the response of news and trader sentiment to bottoming prices where it really doesn't move the market anymore. And really what we get down to is the taking a look at the kind of broader outlook, not only in some important regulatory things, but also in the price action itself. There is something that has come up, but the market has not really responded to it much. It's that the SEC Commission is actually, this has been a big news thing that's been popping up all over cryptocurrency stuff. I get alerts on my phone and email all the time, but the SEC Commission is going to review the rejection of the 9 Bitcoin ETF applications. All right. Now, this is important because the SEC Commission is made up of a group of people. They're appointed. All right, I'm trying to remember how many there are, but man, actually, I want to know that right top. I got to look to see who the commissioners are. Okay, so there's 4. There's the chairman and then the 3 commissioners. So Jay Clayton is the chairman, and Robert Jackson Jr. is a commissioner. Hester M. Pierce, she's important. All right. Anyways, so here's the deal. The commissioners, they have people below them. And so there's people who work for the SEC who are in charge of doing things like approving these kind of things. And the fact that all these ETFs for Bitcoin were denied struck a chord with one of the commissioners, and that was her name's Hester M. Pierce, and she was actually pretty scathing about the response of the SEC people in charge of the Bitcoin regulatory process, ETF process. She was a pretty big dissenting voice in what happened there. So some of the things that she mentioned, she said that the commission erroneously read the Securities Exchange Act, which requires that the rules of a national securities exchange be designed to prevent fraudulent and manipulative acts and practices. It focused its decision not on the ETP shares to be listed, but on the underlying Bitcoin market, instead of the ability of the ETF to surveil trading of and to deter manipulation in the ETP shares listed and traded on BZX. So basically, and she also said the concerns underlying the SEC disapproval order go to the merits of Bitcoin itself as an investment, and that if the disapproval order's rigorous standard were applied consistently, many other commodity-based ETPs would be in peril, as rumors of manipulation plague many commodity markets. Which she makes a really good point, because if Bitcoin is something that is horribly manipulated, why is silver and gold? Well, let's just take silver. Why is silver considered okay to have an ETF? Because silver is heavily manipulated. Nations and banks have been caught manipulating the price of silver. I mean, why is that okay? That's a good point. She made a really good point there. So that really wasn't a good decision on the people below her. She also said that when we do finally approve an ETP on Bitcoin, investors may reasonably, but incorrectly, conclude that the investment carries with it the SEC's excuse me, blah, 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 she also said that the disapproval inhibits the institutionalization of the Bitcoin market. And then this is what I also liked about her. This was probably in the news. This was back in a month ago, probably. And you can read all of her comments. If I can find, I have a link here somewhere. Here it is. Yeah, here's her dissension statement. She really dampens innovation. She was talking in here that she would rather that they err on the side of approving products so that investors, who are generally better judges about these things than we are, can form their own views about a particular innovation and act on those views in the market. And I think this is something that we all need to be very, very clear about, is that the SEC is not meant to create these kind of rules. They're not meant to be the gatekeepers. In fact, she had said in here somewhere that the rejection demonstrates a skeptical view of innovation, which she said that could lead to adverse effects beyond this particular product, and that she where is it at? Where she rejects the role of being an innovator, a role very important from and indeed inconsistent with our mission at the SEC of protecting investors, fostering capital formation, and facilitating fair, orderly, and efficient markets. They are not there to decide who gets to come in and go, and they're not the FDA. All right, an ETF is not a drug. That needs to be decided by a panel of unelected bureaucrats to decide what medicine is going to best serve everybody and who gets to have a protective patent on it for a short period of time. The Bitcoin ETF, basically, in her argument, is that they overstepped their bounds and that they did not do it the correct way, and that their reasons for denying these ETFs were inadequate and not justified. And yeah, that's essentially what it goes down to. So they were focusing mainly on the spot market and not the derivative of the ETF itself. That's really what we are getting into with that issue. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty interesting situation, and it's going to be a pretty interesting a future here, because the fact that the commission, because the commission can veto and turn around these decisions. I don't know how many it takes, if it has to be unanimous or not, but apparently this was something of significance where the commission itself, they are taking on reviewing why these were denied. And so it is very, very probable that these decisions will be reversed. Because really, oh my God, I do not get this. There are futures the SEC has I mean, there's futures contracts on everything under the sun, and there's ETFs for everything that you can think of. I mean, we could look up the seven strangest ETFs. So health shares, enabling technologies, where that's invest in very specific slices of the healthcare field. Gaming ETFs. There's like a video game ETF. I actually have some of that. There's a AI ETF where it's an algorithm using the IBM's Watson AI to determine which stocks are going to make up that. I think that ticker is AIEQ. I own some of that. There's a lithium ETF. There's a freaking stupid carbon ETF that created by the EU. There's just the fact that some ETFs get approved, past and current ETF approval process, the fact that a lot of them have been approved and then Bitcoin's is not, is just smacks of government intervening where it doesn't need to be intervening. It is just a stupid thing, and it's a prime example of how freaked out government is, or how, maybe it's not freaked out, but there's probably people in the SEC who think that, oh, well, Bitcoin's a scam, and so they've determined it's a scam, and then they've determined that, well, we got to protect everybody from participating in this because we know what's best. All right, you don't have to mollycoddle the adult population of the U.S. When you risk your money in something, you know, that's your fault. So, I mean, God, the fact that the SEC is concerned about manipulation in the Bitcoin market, but all the other stuff is kind of they've turned a blind eye to for years, is just ironic as hell. I mean, it's just eye-rolling ironic. So, oh, yeah, right, you should worry about manipulation in Bitcoin market. Okay, what about hog futures in the 90s? No big deal there, right? We can still trade hog futures. Livestock ETFs, no big deal. Silver, gold, oil. You want to talk about a commodity that is heavily manipulated? Let's talk about oil. Oh, but Bitcoin though, that's the one that we should stop the people from participating in. Ugh. I bet the reason is whoever at the SEC was in charge of this Bitcoin ETF. I bet they bought at 14 to 20,000 Bitcoin. I bet that's where they bought during the hype. Of course, I'm probably putting myself at risk here by picking on the SEC because they have the arms of the government are long. But if I had millions of dollars, I would care. Anyways, moving forward. So, taking a look at the Bitcoin chart here on the daily, we have a pretty... God, this is just a tight range. We've been trading, let's see, what time did we first kind of get into this range? If we want to take this on the 9th, the whole month of August, and that's pretty normal for August, really, in any market. August here sitting pretty flat, but we do have a rising market. Okay, we're not seeing a whole lot of selling pressure. In fact, we're at 65.90 right now. Looks like we're going to go hit 6,600, and that may hit pretty soon. And I mean, it already did hit 6,600, but yeah, we're not seeing any strong sell pressure from here at the moment. Not a whole lot of stuff that would signal we're going down, but oh my God, it is Friday and we're getting into the afternoon, so we could see things just go. But otherwise, I mean, this is, we're sitting pretty good so far. Nano is still on a tear. Still moving up at a straight up parabolic. We don't ever want to see Bitcoin's chart look like this. Yes, it does look cool. Oh my gosh, we've risen over 200%. Yes, that does look awesome, but this inevitably turns into the opposite of this. It's the huge fallout. Now this thing's topping out. Why? Just look at the volume. All right, this thing's topping out. This is going to have a deep pullback, and I might get into it, but otherwise, I mean, what we're seeing there is pretty much what we see in Walton Chain. We've had that nice parabolic rise, and you know we've fallen down, and we're maintaining a hold on this trend line. So Walton Chain had its pullback. That is a lot of selling right there. That was bought up handedly. So that is something to keep an eye on. But looking at Bitcoin, you know, we've got a pretty open space throughout this entire area. I need to look at the square of 52 actually to get a good view of what we've got going on. All right. Yes, this is really kind of what I want to see. I want to see. So the 40, we're beyond the 45. I tell you what, we got to be cautious of this because this 45-degree angle has been a sell-off zone more than once in the past. But if we stay above it, that's a pretty good sign. And really the area that we need to that I'm looking at for a nice new kind of a basing zone is the 7,000 value area. So that's at this angle right here. When price got up here first, this was back on Monday or Tuesday, right? 21st? Tuesday. We had that big rise based on two things. The technicals said that this was going to happen, but then also we had the BitMEX shut down for a half hour. Had this drive up to this angle, was rejected, came back down, and really you only want to see this on the daily, but we came back above the 45, so we crossed back above the 45, tested it, we've held it, so the behavior is to test the angle above, which is this one again, and so that is at the 6,900 value area, where if we were to cross above that, we get into the 7,000 zone, and then we'd be in a different looking market. This is still looking like a pretty typical bear flag. But we'll have to see how this plays out over the weekend. I think Bitcoin's showing some pretty healthy movement and pressure, and it's got a good reaction at the moment. The volume is, it's volume. I don't know how you determine Bitcoin's volume. Looking at it on Binance, it's pretty good. On BitMEX, let's look at Kraken's. Oh yeah, here's this head and shoulder pattern on a larger time frame if I look at it on a daily. All right. Yeah. The dollar index, should take a peek at that. Dollar index today facing a lot of pressure yesterday. And we're going to go over the dollar index and currencies a little bit during cryptos because they're heavily related, but they're not necessarily correlated. But ideally, we're going to get to a point where the dollar strength or weakness affects the underlying Bitcoin, or maybe not Bitcoin itself, but maybe the alt market. But looking at the dollar index, you can see that there's a broad, on a long-term large head and shoulders formation that we're sitting at. And then right as we get to the neckline, we found this support. But yesterday we had this inverse head and shoulders pattern that had a false break higher, and it caught a whole bunch of folks and probably did a little bit of a trap on some people. So, looking at that to play out, we'll need a pretty swift drive lower to break this. But the fact that we're still sitting down here is a pretty good sign that we may just have this bear flag form before we drop down. Really looking forward to seeing what happens with the entire foreign currency market near the end of the day. Bitcoin. Yes. So looking at the altcoin market, if I'm looking at Cardano, I didn't have it drawn in here, but it's got a triangle that is looking for a breakout. Actually, a couple ways to. We did break down below it and traded back into it. Good bullish momentum here. Ultimately a break. I've got buy orders I know I've got buy orders sitting at 95. I'm sitting on, where's my phone? It's easier to check up right there. Because I've picked up quite a bit lately. I'm sitting on 52,525.14955 Cardano. And I think my cost basis in there is around what, $5,400 or something on my Cardano position, which I'm fine with, because if this thing goes up to like 25 cents, I mean, you do the math, that's a nice gain. If we just do 52,000, I mean, that's $13,000 right there. That's more than I've already doubled my money. More than doubled. And then you think, if it hits $1, that's $52,000. If it hits, if it hits $2, that's $104,000. I mean, just, it's always fun to think like that, but you got to have the stomach to wear it out. So, Bitcoin, Cardano here, XLM. Probably going to see a very similar chart. It looks kind of bear flaggy, but same kind of triangle we're seeing in here. Scroll down, look at Zcash. Zcash actually caught a bid there, didn't it? Wait a minute. Where's the trading view one? Here it is. I want to see the ZEC USD. That's the one I want. I want Bitfinex. Ooh, that is actually pretty nice buy there. Clearly that was a structure break. What was the... Yeah. They call Bitcoin the perfect technical market, and shockingly, just trend lines are effective in Bitcoin trading, or cryptocurrencies rather. I have found that, but I also love me some Ichimoku. Ichimoku on the hourly, we could be approaching a long condition here. Got to wait for it to cross above. Zcash, I like that chart. Let's see, ETC. Oh, speaking of ETC, so we haven't done this for a while. I haven't looked at the RRG, the relative rotation graph. So looking at the relative rotation graph, again, if you're unfamiliar with it, it is, so these are all of the ones that I can get from Optima for cryptos, but hopefully sometime they'll have more. But again, quick review of the relative rotation graph. So what we're looking at 4 sectors. We have the leading in the upper right, weakening in the bottom right, we have lagging in the bottom left, and we have improving in the top left. And basically how we look at this is, if something is in the leading category, I remember on Optima's video on tutorial on this, he talked about, think about it being a race, and that anything sitting in the leading indication is way ahead of the pack. All right, and then when it moves from leading into weakening, it's still ahead of the pack, but the momentum is slowing down. Okay, so that's something we want to notice. So I always think of leading as something I don't want to buy, weakening is something I want to look at for, either looking to, well, weakening is something I want to look at to see how low it's going to go, because then when it gets into lagging is where it is forming, or it has formed a bottom. And then when I see it start to point up and get into improving, that means it's starting to rise. And so I'm looking to buy things in lagging, and I'm looking to sell things in leading. That's basically how I view it. So, and what we're looking at is the center of this. This is called a price weighted average. So the performance of each of these cryptos is weighted against their aggregate performance. So the average of their performance. So it's like an ETF, where it's like we're comparing the performance of these as like an ETF. And so the closer something is to the center, the less of a trade opportunity you have. Where the farther out they are, the bigger of a profit potential that you have. So when I'm looking at this chart, well, let's kind of zip this back maybe to the 20th. Okay, so look at where IOTA's at. So I'm gonna go look to the 17th, 16th. Okay, 17th of August. 17th of August is telling me that IOTA is obviously the worst performer out of the bunch, but that it is pointing up. So I want to kind of compare that to the. Do I have IOTA down here? I don't. I used to. Oh no, right here. So if I look at IOTA. Oops. And I want to get. Oops. I'll look at the daily chart. Want to look at the 18th. Or 17th, rather. 17th? No. Here's the 17th. Okay, so it started to point up right here. And then I see it's pretty much been trading flat since then. But it's pointing up. And IOTA, according to this, is the best, has the best trade potential because it's underperforming everybody else. Then I look at NEO because NEO's pointing up, even though ideologically I hate NEO. NEO dollar. On the same date, we see that it did catch a bid. I mean, that's pretty standard for everything. And then if we look at the rest of them, they're just kind of all clumped together. So eventually, once the market picks up quite a bit, we'll see these things floating around a lot, again, away from each other. So this is all the way back to February of 2018, where we were in a big bear market. And we can see in the relative rotation graph, as I slide this, we can see how these things move from one area to the other. And if we remember when Ethereum Classic caught a nice bump, which was in, where were we at? Ethereum Classic. It got the Coinbase listing issue. So Ethereum Classic, this was back on the 15th of August. Let's look at that. Okay, so before the 15th of August, we see it was sitting in this, it was pointing down, looking like it wanted to sell. Then we got into the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th. Looking to sell when things are in the leading, and that is exactly what happened. We had the rising prices, putting it into the leading category, and definitely wanted to see the momentum drop to sell. And so this is kind of a nice way to look. I mean, it's actually, we need more data for this to be even more accurate, but one of the nice things is relative rotation graphs are excellent in every single market that you can get them in. So this is foreign currencies. You know, this is rated against the dollar index. So if we're looking at, you know, trying to see here, if we look at on the daily, we see the Ukrainian, whatever that is, is not like, oh my God, what is this? Oh yeah, this is the Turkish lira. So Turkish lira, if you want to see something that is sucking, that there's that. And then you know what this guy is back here? This is Bitcoin. Now here's the interesting thing. Bitcoin, according to the RRG, they put Bitcoin in with the foreign currencies, and Bitcoin is like, it is crossing into the lagging territory, okay? It's at the it's in the weakening category, transitioning to the lagging category. This is telling us that there is a bottom. All right, that there is a bottom, and that it is underperforming every single currency on the planet, and commodity like or metal commodities like we have gold and silver up here. The second worst thing in the world right now against the dollar is the Turkish lira. So Bitcoin is all the way down here. All right. I mean, wait a minute. Oh, is this is yeah? Never mind. Venezuelan Bolivar. we don't worry about that when it's a dead currency, pretty much. The you know, one of the genius things they've done with the Venezuelan Bolivar is that so Maduro's government, the trick to inflation problems is to just remove a whole bunch of zeros at the end of your currency, and then that magically makes it better. Yeah, that's not how it works. But now instead they want to peg it to their cryptocurrency, the Petrocoin. That's not a thing either. Okay, so XBT, Bitcoin, we see is way underperforming everybody else, and when it's transitioning into the lagging category, we want to see it flatten out and then start to rise, and then that turns into a buying opportunity idea when I'm looking at this. So that's what I'm looking forward to. You know, other than that, I mean, I'm gonna cut it short because I've got a date with my wife for lunch here. So there's really not a whole bunch to review right now. Anyways, we got such a flat market in altcoins and in our majors in Ethereum, Bitcoin, and Litecoin. I would be surprised if we did not see some big price action over the weekend going into Monday. I would really be surprised if we did not see something big happen, because if you remember yesterday, I was going over the financial astrology components. We have planetary retrograde here. This is Mars. So we're exiting Mars retrograde, and we have Uranus trine the Sun. We have the Sun trine Saturn, and we have the Sun in Virgo. Basically, the Sun goes into Virgo here, and so there's a whole lot of interesting things happening in this zone. And actually I wrote last night. I talked about these events, and oops, where did I go? What did I do with you? Give me a second here. Why is that not? Hold on one second. Why is this? Don't know why I can't get it to pull up. That's weird. Oh, there's why. I'm just looking at it because I wrote some things out there. Okay, so the retrograde cycle ends on the 26th. There's a full moon on the 26th. Moon is apogee on the 23rd. Sun enters Virgo on the 22nd. Then we have these trine aspects. So in financial astrology, there's a history of price action before, after, or during a certain aspect, and so you have to identify what was the behavior of price at this event. So one of the things that I'm gonna kind of go over my time here a little bit, because my wife just texted that she's not quite ready, but one of the things that we look for is we're correlating, and I wrote it in here, is that financial astrology, it's about the correlation of planet positions or angles to the behavior in financial markets. Basically, it's the process of observing what is going on in the sky while observing what is happening here on Earth and correlating the two events. There's thousands of years of history to support the probabilities of certain behavior, and this goes along with what I was talking about yesterday with my wife. What she said is that in my field, past performance is the only way to predict future behavior. So that is a pretty profound statement. But for instance, well, I'll do this on the Aussie dollar. So the Aussie dollar, I was doing some note taking and research on this. So I found, let's see, I want to go to aspects, and one of the ones that I found that was pretty interesting was Jupiter conjunct Venus. And for whatever reason, the Jupiter conjunct Venus seems to show up at really key points in the Australian dollars market, because that's what I was studying it on, the Australian dollar. So that's a pretty interesting aspect for the Australian dollar. And then for Bitcoin, you know, we do the same things. And so the general like trend of Bitcoin when we get to these like the Uranus trine the sun is we often see pretty easy movement in price and changes in price. And there's news wise, there's generally a whole bunch of excitement in the underlying technology of Bitcoin. And it's not very idle. There's like a sudden quick improvement and volume of sentiment when this happens. And then we have that Saturn trine Sun, and the price behavior and sentiment behavior historically for Bitcoin is kind of along the same lines of what I just talked about. It's a pretty smooth and significant move, and the progress to new the progress through areas of price resistance is fairly easy. And that's kind of one of that's really kind of goes in line with the astrology, like the practice of astrology, not financial astrology, but in the practice of astrology, trines are associated with easygoing things, if I remember that correctly. And then we have the sun when it goes into Virgo. This one was pretty telling because whenever the sun has transitioned into Virgo, before that, excuse me, there's often a lot of negative sentiment that needs to be overcome. There's generally a cluster of negative effects that have happened prior to the sun going into Virgo, and there's a struggle to find like equilibrium in price, and there's a possible increase in volatility. So and all this correlates really well to basically what we've been discussing for the last couple months, really. And that's what I'm not interpreting these things off of some horoscope. I'm just taking, this is the angular relationship, the longitudinal coordinates and angular relationship between these two, between the sun and a planet. And then I look back in time, all right, and I review the price action prior to and after and during. And then I go back and I look for news events through that entire time. This is why it's important to journal. All right, because like anniversary dates of highs and lows repeat themselves frequently. Like if there's an all-time high on I don't know, like March 3rd, you can bet your butt that around March 3rd, before or after March 3rd, you're going to find another important swing high or swing low again. That's just something that shows up a lot. That has nothing to do with astrology, but in a lot of respects, it's the same principles. It's just a different way of looking at it. And so whenever there's been whenever the sun has transitioned into Virgo, which is pretty much the same time every year. Well, it's not the same time every year, but it's around there. We often get a news events that are kind of culminating into negativity, but then that kind of wears off. So that is what we're looking at going forward. And it is time for me to bounce and go have lunch with my wife. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great weekend. I hope you guys have had a good trading week. It'll be exciting to watch this market over the weekend. And yeah, Forex Lens, folks, I'll see you Monday morning at 6:30, and the rest of you, I will see you in the afternoon. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and remember that I believe on the 31st, the free service of this is ending, and it'll be a monthly fee. And yeah, I hope to talk to you guys later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.